Hi, I'm Roland Titan, a self-proclaimed authority on chess variant design and balance. Um, and I'm here today to talk to you about sharpness. Now, sharpness is something that I've only just thought of a more strict definition of. It's something we've been talking about for a long time among my community. We're attempting to balance various chess variants against each other, such as Shang-Chi versus chess, Shogi versus chess, Shogi versus Shang-Chi, all in this like one game, right? And we have extremely lofty goals, but those that are involved are very passionate about the project. Now, there is a tendency of some of these battalions, which is what we call our armies, to be balanceable via engine, but exhibit very different results with human play. And that's true of any asymmetrical chess variant. And it's directly related to that sharpness. Sharpness, here's the definition: sharpness is the ratio of the number of losing moves to the number of winning moves, sometimes drawing moves, in a position. And it becomes more obvious to the human mind when there is only one or two not losing moves. Now, engine balancing, which is the use of an engine of the strength of stockfish to have these armies face each other, and whichever one is winning gets nerfed, or whichever one is losing gets buffed until you have an even starting position up to a very high depth, right? Now, it only requires with calculation, assuming an above human engine, that both sides have at least one not losing sequence of moves down to a certain depth. And let's thinking about that, you'll see where I'm going very quickly. Let's look at the case of an engine that isn't stronger than all humans. Higher sharpness means that it is more likely to make a mistake. This includes us, the actual humans playing these games. And in an asymmetrical game, this sharpness may necessarily make that option seem weaker, as it loses more often, despite being balanced or even too strong with higher level of play. Now let's look at three examples. A perfect sniper in a shooter game. Let's take, I don't know, Widowmaker from Overwatch. Completely remove the charge system, but make her specific enemy hitbox. She has to hit one spot on any hitbox. And as long as she hits that one spot, she kills, and otherwise she does no damage. She can fire as often as she likes, semi-automatic, no recoil, no issue. And it does, like, I don't know, obscene amount of damage, 5,000 damage, as long as it hits that one spot. Now, if you give that to a complete beginner, they're going to think the character is completely useless. You give that to a good enough player, they might be able to get some use out of it, because it's just pixel perfect timing. You give that to a good enough player, assume a perfect player, a computer, with an aimbot, and all of a sudden it is the most broken thing in the game. And that is the catch, right? We, as people balancing these games, try to hit that sweet spot where the graph of the maximum potential for the level of play and the actual point of balance all converges onto a single point that we choose. And for a large number of games, for example, real-time games and shooters that humans play, we're assuming to balance for some point or some set of points where they all intersect and cross, where along this continuity of where we want the gameplay to be. Let's see if I can think about how to say this. We have a graph of the maximum potential of a character at a certain skill level. For this assumed like extreme case of the perfect sniper, it's basically nothing, and then it jumps up to useful, and then it rises up into infinity, right? And that does have a point of crossing the balance line of where we want everything to be, of the maximum potential for the skill level of that character actually meeting, for a brief moment, the same amount of output that a normal character in that game has. And we, in Titan's Battalion, cheat a little bit. We set chess as that baseline. We use that as a reference point. However it varies, because it does vary in strength, however it varies, that is our line. And if it crosses the line at the right point, then we've done our job. Now, that line does go off to infinity. If you had infinite depth, you could solve chess, and that would be playing with a solved version of chess. That would be perfect play, right? But these other armies were trying to cross it at a certain point, and by engine balancing, all we're doing is causing whatever level of strength the engine is at to hit that line at the point of the engine's potential strength. And the sharpness is very notable. Now, that isn't to say that engine balancing isn't good enough. In fact, I would argue that engine balancing will still be very important and effective for this game, Copium. Because of this. Because if we make the target reference slightly above or just at perfect human play, especially if they have access to the engine for pre-planning and opening theory, then what we've effectively done is make the most balanced game ever created. The most balanced asymmetrical game ever created. Have to correct myself. Or at least one of. We will be equal, whoever the best is. Now let's look at Empire chess. And furthermore, any variant with Empire in it. For example, your Empire versus Orda set. Of course, there's nuanced things where certain armies will be stronger against certain other armies. If you make a character in a game that only does frost damage and another character in said game is completely immune to frost damage, it doesn't matter how strong the frost damage guy is against everyone else. He's playing rock, paper, scissors. It happens. But in Empire chess, we have an army with a whole lot of pieces that move as queens and capture in other ways. I would argue that that increases the total number of moves by a very large margin. And I don't think I would be going too far to say that. Now, this means that there will be moments in Empire chess where there may be one or two legal moves that actually win the game, but you have a much larger number of possible moves to think about. And because of that, the sharpness is emergent to be much higher than chess. And you can even just see this on the opening position. You have, because of the slightly more space and then the pawns, more than 20. I haven't done the actual math. It would be 2 plus 2 for each of the siege towers in the corner, and then 3 for the other 6 pieces. So 3 times 6, 18, plus 4, 22, plus 8, 30. You have 30 moves in the opening versus the chess side only having 20. And this difference continues to show throughout the rest of the match. Empire, in any game it's in, will always have a very, very large number of legal moves. And that can create issues if the engine you are balancing with is not strong enough, and if you're attempting to balance for a human level of play, because the vast majority of humans, especially weaker humans, are not going to be able to get the potential out of the army, because in those positions of high sharpness, they're going to be more likely to miss. In those positions where they don't have a lot of good moves, they're going to be more likely to find one that is bad, and therefore be more likely to lose. So the lower human level of play is going to be biased against Empire, even if it is balanced. And keep in mind that the definition of balance via this argument is looser than how we typically say it. We think of balance as this absolute thing, and I don't think it necessarily is. Balance is only absolute if you mathematically prove it at the highest possible level of human play, and that definition has problems for all other levels of play. It's a lot to think about, and a lot of, you know, shooting from the hip, going on feel a little bit for most games, especially games like shooters like Overwatch or MOBAs like League of Legends. That requires a lot of work to even achieve a semblance of balance. And you can get very close with just math, and then you have to fine tune from there based off of what you see as trends in the community. Because if you set a certain goal, like you pick a point in the player skill level and try to have all characters of equal strength at that point, you can achieve that. You could just fine tune everything, look what happens, and just continue fine tuning until you achieve exactly that goal. It's just buffs and nerfs. Which buffs and which nerfs you do is very dependent on the type of game you want to make and what the game feel is. But just making buffs and nerfs until that point is achieved is humanly feasible as long as you get the data back fast enough, which in a lot of these cases you don't get the data back fast enough. Again, a lot to think about. Now let's also look at my last example, what happens in the Shang-Chi versus chess balance that we continue to do. And that is, first of all, we have a game feel issue, that Shang-Chi feels very different from chess, and we're trying to allow both of them to feel the way they do at the same time. And then, this was especially true of our old draft we called Imperial Palace, which was a fusion of Shang-Chi and Zhangyi. That one we had very balanced at our foreseeable level. It was in beta. We had it fully ready and to go into the gameplay from just a balance perspective, and ready for engine testing, because we do human testing first due to the overhead of our studio. As in, we're too cheap to pay somebody to actually make the engines yet, because we don't have that kind of money. And that's actually pretty expensive, it turns out. That had the medieval side, the chess side, having a very, very sharp game for the first 5 moves, where you had to find very specific responses and more than likely memorize them out of the opening for 5 moves, due to the existence of the cannons. And then had about 10 more moves where the existence of the queen meant that the Shang-Chi player was in the same position, where they had to find very sharp moves in order to not lose. And we managed to find them beyond our ability to fail at that in our year-ish of testing on and off and balance tuning. And that experience allows us to continue testing Shang-Chi without going through that rigmarole every time. We know what to look for, like any time that you can stack cannons for some reason on turns 1 and 2. You have to look out for this weird knight tactic, and sometimes rooks just die, sometimes queens just die. You know, we're much better at stopping that from happening. But I think it goes to show how important this sharpness is when we're talking about balance. Because I believe having those high sharpness positions will reveal the weaknesses in whatever testing you're doing, and will necessarily make the human play not match. Anyways, this has been very long-winded. I've been talking for 15 minutes. If anyone's stuck around this long. I can't speak anymore. It's 6 a.m. I woke up 2 hours ago and started watching a video about splines that got me here. Thank you for sticking around. You're an absolute nerd and a legend. I love you. Goodbye.